Jeb Bush has a new campaign strategy, and it involves a significant addition of Bush, his mom. Not just his mom, that sounds disgusting, but his brother as well, who he had previously distanced himself from significantly on the campaign, not wanting to be tied to his brother's political legacy, not appearing very often with his brother. Both his brother and his mother all of a sudden appearing all over the campaign trail with him. In this first video, you're going to see a joint interview that Jeb Bush did with his mother, as political candidates so often do, where his mother has a little bit of advice for him. Let's watch.
He's got the same values that America seems to have lost. He's almost too polite. I don't know if I gave him advice, I would say, why don't you interrupt like the other people do?
Really?
Yes, I would say that.
I've gotten better at interrupting, Mom. Come on.
You mean interrupt during the debate?
Yes. He's so polite. We brought him up that way. And he does not brag like some people we know.
Who are you talking about?
I can't remember.
Do you think someone else that's running for president is bragging too much?
I'm not getting in a spitting match with him. He can spit further than I can.
She would have made a great background extra in a cowboy movie. Just occasionally throw in a little zinger at one of the characters. So she had some advice for him there. He's too polite. He doesn't interrupt as they so often do. And of course you have to love Jeb's reaction. Come on, Mom.
Come on, Buck.
I'm breaking all the time.
Come on.
And he's trying to split the difference between, of course, likability is such a big thing in a presidential campaign, and he wants to be likable. But he, I hate to say it, but Mama's right in the sense that he's outgunned on that platform. I mean, he's just you've got to be aggressive when you're up against that crew.
Especially that big of a crew.
Right.
And with each of them trying to compete with the other to appear to be the biggest alpha male. Yeah, he doesn't particularly do well when he tries to break in. There were a couple other politicians in this cycle who did that. Well, they'll say, well, I'd like to respond. And then they say no, and he's like, oh, okay. And that's the worst. You might as well not even said anything. And I agree that it is good advice, but it's not good advice that you necessarily want your mom to give to you on live television.
Yeah, unless you feel as though, first of all, he's at DEF CON 1.
Oh, you think that could be more likable if he has that with his mom?
Right. I think he's just, of course, they're just throwing everything up against the wall to see what sticks. But I think he might have been perceived in his judgment or in the judgment of his people as someone who was overmatched in these debates. And so he's trying to kind of explain it away maybe with that, well, my son is polite. He's not willing to be an a-hole like the rest of those guys on stage.
Yeah, this is the spin is that,
right.
Yeah, he comes off like a wimp, not because he's a wimp, but because he's well-mannered and he was raised correctly.
Exactly.
Yeah, but is that effective
and
to
of course,
say, well, be nicer to him, everybody. He's a polite boy.
If it were his only problem, it might be effective. He has a bunch of problems beyond that, right?
His you know how they tried to get away from the Bush name? They went Jeb exclamation. It should be shrug explanation. Come on. I say it should be Jeb explanation point. Please, what is the explanation? And
seriously, please clap.
But that was
please clap.
Please clap. Come on, give me a break. Look, his entire campaign could be summed up in a shrug. Come on.
Well, that and the reaction from the audience. Oh, really?
Yeah, like
if I was running against a person, I would want him to say the please clap line. I don't know if you saw that video.
Yeah, no, of course. It was pathetic in a sense.
It was pathetic. And look, it wasn't as bad as the headlines
actually
made it out to be necessarily, but it's still fairly pathetic. He already got attacked by Trump, bullied by Trump, the last time his mom was out defending him out on her own. I have to imagine the ads that they're going to make out of this. Like, if you want to be portrayed as, they're already saying you're low energy. And now your mom is saying you're too polite. Like, they're going to put that into an ad, and you're never going to recover. He's never going to be able to walk outside of his house after this.
Well, I mean, I don't even know the inside the house is going to be so safe. I mean, I wouldn't want to go to a family reunion after the drubbing that he's getting. And as you say, you string all this stuff together, and it looks like a Christmas video or something. I mean, it's really pretty rude. And there was a way to handle, like Jimmy Dore, you would have handled that situation where no one applauds on an applaud line. You say, well, what? I'm sorry, this crowd isn't into protecting the country, or that's not, you know what I mean? Then all of a sudden, everybody go, oh, yeah. You don't
Or how about this? You're right, we should have a moment of silence for those lost abroad. Something like that. Because I like making jokes about dead soldiers.
Yeah, nice choice.
But at the beginning of that sentence where he begged them to please clap, if you watch the video, he starts talking, I'm not going to be out there shooting my mouth off, blow harden. He said blow harden.
He got that from
First, that is not the past tense of blow hard.
It's not, no.
The past tense of blow hard is blowing harder.
Which don't say that either.
I'm not going to be out there blowing harder.
Yeah, don't do that.
So it's not blow harder.
Yeah.
You can't, hey, are you out there hardering? No, you're blowing hard.
Well, we also have, I can't say for sure, both of these, the video that you just saw and the quotes I'm about to read happened yesterday. I can't say for sure that these quotes happened after, but I like to imagine that they did. You saw his mom giving him his advice on TV and him saying, come on, Mom.
Come on.
And he says this during a rally. He said that former First Lady Barbara Bush is not as great as everybody thinks she is.
Saw him say it.
I jokingly, oh, did you really?
Yep.
I jokingly say that when we were growing up in Midland and Houston, that Mom was fortunate not to have a child abuse hotline available.
Real funny.
Bush added that the discipline of learning right and wrong was her doing, not his father's. I get that that's supposed to be endearing. Man,
Yeah.
if I'd been able to report her for abusing me, I would have.
Yeah, it's a good thing because she used to beat the shit out of us. Not hard enough to make us not commit war crimes, but we certainly did eat our peas.
Exactly, yeah.
That's right. This informed my brother's feelings about torture, right? Right.
She
My
used to-
mom used to waterboard us. I mean, not as bad as Guantanamo, or not as bad as... It wasn't a black ops type kind of discipline in my house, but...
He'd go to Abu Ghraib and just say, oh, stop complaining. I had it way worse as a 4-year-old.
Oh, come on. Give me a break. I grew up with Barbara Bush.
Seriously. Now, we have a little bit more from the rally, him speaking about his father, and I agree that this is a part of, before he wanted to distance himself, make himself independent. He didn't even put Bush after the Jeb in his signs, but now he's bringing in all the relatives, and here he is talking about his father.
My dad was this perfect, idyllic man who, to this day, is the greatest man alive. But she was the one that taught us right and wrong, I can promise you that.
I like that he turned to his mom to say that. I still think it was kind of a cheesy line. Maybe he legitimately sort of choked up. I don't want to get into the whole thing of questioning whether politicians are really crying or not. I don't think there was an onion under the podium.
I will.
Yeah.
Because no, this is all theater. And it reminds me of when I was in Jefferson, Iowa, just a week ago. And
Fine work, Jimmy.
Thank you. Ted Cruz, when he's taking the stage, there's his wife, Heidi. She introduces him. And then he gives her one of those Al Gore smooches, and he just envelops her because she's so tiny and he's a bigger guy. And he just gives her one of those really, and then he goes on, talks about, first thing is how much he loves her. And I love you. You're my sweet daughter, my angel. He calls her my angel, right? And it's like as if he just came back from Iraq, you know? And it's like, but if you think about it, they're on the bus together. It's not like you haven't seen her.
That's
so
true.
It's all theater.
Yeah.
It's all, I got to go out and proclaim my love for you. So that's what this is. It's all theater. And who cries for a second and then, there's no, come on. Give me a break.
I could see a guy choking up when he's talking about his old man, who's clearly got one, he's not in the, he's an old guy.
He's
He
an
could
old
go
guy.
at any hour now. I mean, I'm going to give the guy the benefit of the doubt there, but it is, this is a crowd, and you talk about sort of hack, trite moments. This is a crowd. I mean, it's bizarre that it happens, that seems to eat up those hack, trite moments. And so, yes, they do serve up that crap. My God, that Ted Cruz acceptance speech that he was giving after he won Iowa. My God, it's still going on.
Acceptance sermon.
Glory be to God.
Yeah.
And he had more and more of those beats, which are, Mom, I just want to say to you. I mean, that is theater, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
he's just- but here the guy might have choked up talking about his dad. But I'm just saying those theatrical moments seem to somehow carry the water for more than they should, but they do.
Yeah, Ted Cruz really hammers the
religion.
The religion, and he also hammers the spitefulness of religion, or the anger. And on my first day in office, I'll bring back hanging. You know, he's one of those
Did he
guys.
actually say that?
I think he said that. I'm
Yeah,
not
maybe.
sure.
They'd save money on the chemicals. Yeah, and we know that people loved the Trump response about, how dare you say something bad about New York? 9/11 happened, and everybody went insane, as if Trump had done anything during the cleanup, as if he was within 7 miles of the event when it happened. But you simply say it, and people are like, well, yeah, that was a bad event, and you do still live in the general vicinity of that.
And if it were a wrestling match, you would have seen the referee go like that. 2 points for the reversal. You know what I mean? Right? It looked like, holy cow, he's getting, and then all of a sudden Trump just turned it over. And so in a sense, they were, and he got all the, he got currency from that moment because he reversed it.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that was the big one.
Exactly.